What's going on, guys? It's Cimoooooooo. So today I'm bringing to you a card discussion on card destruction. Say that 10 times fast. Now, card destruction is one of those cards that we saw come off the ban list, and a lot of people, especially those who've played the game for a very long time, immediately started to panic because this is one of the craziest cards probably ever printed just because it's so powerful. It's one of those power one-ofs that can honestly dictate the fate of a game, and that's why I felt like I wanted to discuss it. I wanted to see how much of an impact this card might have once we kind of analyze it further than just what's beyond the surface. But before we do, big shout out today to Funk Life for becoming the newest YouTube channel member. And if you guys want to help support me in the channel through a YouTube channel membership, hit the join button down below or check out the links in the description. But without further ado, let's go ahead and get right into it. So we're going to go ahead and read off Card Destruction's effect. I know like 95% of you probably know what this card does, but if there's some newer players, you know, they might not understand the power of this card, and so it's pretty good to have everyone on the same page knowing what the effect is. So Card Destruction is a spell card that reads as follows. Each player discards their hand, then draws the same number of cards they discarded. Pretty simple effect, right? I love effects that are just one line of text. They're really straightforward, nothing too convoluted, but those are also some of the scariest effects in the game, if we're being completely honest. Now, I know what a lot of you guys are gonna say, oh, Danger Dark World, you know, this card is insane in Danger Dark World. And yes, there's a lot of decks that Card Destruction is insane in, but is Card Destruction gonna be the sole reason that a deck like Danger Dark World becomes a tier 1 contender? Probably not. I mean, yes, it's a powerful card, and yes, if it resolves, it's probably going to win you the game more often than not, but that one card alone isn't going to justify a deck becoming tier 1. I mean, it's at 1, you still have to hard draw it, it's basically unsearchable, but what I wanted to do was I wanted to analyze Card Destruction in the context of some of the current meta archetypes and whether or not Card Destruction might actually be viable and become a staple one of in these decks. So I think the first deck that logically makes sense to start with is Trickstar, because when you read Card Destruction, this kind of just seems like a spell version of Trickstar Reincarnation, which basically means Trickstar now have 4 copies of Reincarnation in a way, and that's really, really good. Let me give you a hypothetical example of why Card Destruction can be so powerful. So let's say you open with your 5-card hand and you have a Card Destruction in there, and let's say you just start doing your normal Trickstar plays, you know, summon Candina, get Light Stage, get Licorice, things like that, and then let's say you tag out that Candina for 2 copies of Licorice. Now you go ahead and drop down Card Destruction. Well, what's going to happen is your opponent's going to discard their whole 5-card hand, draw 5 new cards, Licorice is going to go ahead and kick in, and you're going to take 1200 damage per Licorice, meaning they're going to lose 2400 life points before their turn has even begun. Now, that may not seem like a big deal, and kind of at the cost of 1 card, is that really worth it? Well, yeah, actually, since Trickstars kind of, you know, rely on burn damage, and that's effectively their win condition sometimes, you just got your opponent like 1/4 to 1/3 of the way dead before they even started their turn. Then they're going to take 400 to 800 damage on their next draw phase, depending on how many Licorice you have on the field. They're going to take another 800 for each card they add to their hand after that. It really starts to add up, and that's a lot of damage. So you have to realize that having a 4th pseudo copy of Trickstar Reincarnation for this deck is actually really good, but it even goes further than that, because what I like about Card Destruction is you have the ability to manipulate the cards that you're going to get rid of, but your opponent doesn't really have a choice. So say for instance, let's say you draw a card or maybe 2 cards that aren't exactly optimal for a specific matchup. You can purposefully ditch those cards with Card Destruction, you're going to draw 2 new cards, and those cards could be like a Scapegoat, they could be a Terraforming to get you into another Light Stage, it could be a Hand Trap. There's so many powerful cards that the Trickstar deck just runs that it would be happy to throw some of those away at the cost of losing some card advantage to get better cards that are going to be more suited for a particular matchup. And you can extrapolate that logic and realistically apply it to any of the other meta decks at the same time. Let's take another example. Let's look at Sky Strikers Pure. Now, Sky Striker is really neat because with card destruction, you want to get spell cards in the graveyard, right? That's why the deck plays stuff like Foolish Burial Goods and Metal Foes Fusion to up that spell count as quickly as possible. Well, since the deck is primarily comprised of spell cards, with card destruction, you can just dump your whole hand immediately. You're now going to have 3 spells in the graveyard, probably guaranteed, draw a whole new hand, and now all of your Sky Striker cards are going to gain added value because you've hit that 3 spell count immediately. And one other thing is that Hornet Drones did go to 1 on this last list as well, so the deck lost a little bit of consistency because that's kind of a few less copies of drones or, you know, Ray in that instance to go into their link monsters. However, because card destruction acts as like a pseudo mulligan, you're going to be able to ditch your hand, and let's say you didn't draw an engage, or maybe you didn't draw a Ray, or maybe you didn't draw one of your starter cards that's necessary for the deck to function. You don't mind taking that -1 in order to have the opportunity to draw 4 cards, and maybe now you drew an engage and whatever other cards you needed, and now your deck is going to start going, and that's a really big deal. Yeah, sure, you lost card advantage, but if your deck can function, that's perfectly fine. You know, another deck is something like Goki. I mean, Goki is very simple in the fact that it only needs a couple of cards in order for it to combo off an Extra Link, to Gumblar Loop, to do basically all the Goki stuff that it's done previously, but sometimes you're going to get those hands that may not necessarily come out that way. Well, with card destruction, you can dump your hand, draw a whole new one, or you can keep specific pieces, like maybe you can set an instant fusion, or you can set a Goki rematch, and if you dump your hand of Goki monsters, or you happen to draw the cards that you do need, now you're going to be able to combo off at the expense of going -1, but now you're just going to Extra Link your opponent, and you just won that game anyway, thanks solely due in part to card destruction. Now, again, it is a one-of, so you are hoping to draw it in this instance, but I like the fact here that it also helps set up your graveyard, because there's so many cards nowadays that rely on, you know, graveyard interactions or synergies to really get things going. I mean, with Trickstar, you can just dump Reincarnation to immediately have a way to resurrect a Trickstar monster. Sky Striker, we already talked about, where you want to get spells in the graveyard anyway, and Goki, you can just dump your monsters to resurrect them with Soul Charge, Monster Reborn, Goki Rematch. I mean, there's so many easy ways for you to be able to recover those monsters and kind of help either start or extend your plays. And that's what I really like about this card. It does something that's really cool, but at the same time, it also offers something that a lot of people might not consider, and that's knowledge of what your opponent is playing. Let's say you're going into game 1 of a match at a tournament, and you have no idea what your opponent's playing. Card Destruction's cool because it's one of the very few cards that gives you insight into your opponent's hand so that you can know and prepare your strategy for how to combat whatever it is that they are playing. So for instance, if you start playing a Trickstar deck and you use Card Destruction and they ditch their whole hand, and now you see that they're playing Goki or you see that they're playing Sky Striker, then now you know that you need to prepare certain outs to prevent certain things from going off. So maybe you need to dig for hand traps, maybe you need to set up certain negations or wait for certain moments, so you're not going to be caught off guard and going into that game 1 blind. There's very few cards that can actually do that. I know like Psyframe Lord Omega is one of them as well, but even then, sometimes you're going to hit a generic card, you're not going to know what you're playing against. Card Destruction, they're discarding 5 fucking cards, so if you don't know what they're playing after they ditch their whole hand, then I don't know what to tell you at that point. But there are some downsides to Card Destruction. I do want to make sure I'm fair and cover those as well. I've mentioned it several times already in this video, but Card Destruction is a -1, and -1s typically are not that good. And what I mean by that is if you have a 5-card opening hand, if you activate Card Destruction just straight up first card you play, you're only going to get 4 cards, so you lost a card in order to basically mulligan your hand. And that's not a bad thing, because just having a whole fresh new hand, like we mentioned in the Sky Striker example, could be a really big deal, but you are losing a card, and with card advantage being so valuable in Yu-Gi-Oh!, obviously the more cards you have, the more options you have, and the better off you're going to be. It's still something you have to consider that most of the time you're taking a minus in order to do that. Now, this can be mitigated, as I I'd mentioned as well, because if you're playing certain cards that trigger when they hit the graveyard, then maybe you're going to be able to recur that card that you lost for card destruction through some of your in-archetype cards like Danger, Dark World, Burning Abyss. Anything that triggers in the graveyard and gives you a card back is basically just going to mitigate the entire cost in general. So if you have a deck that has a lot of cards that can trigger that way, or that you can regenerate that advantage, then card destruction seems like a pretty good fit regardless. But the other big glaring issue with card destruction, at least that I see, this card can backfire really fucking hard depending on the matchup that you're playing against. Let's say you're going up against a Danger Dark World player and you don't know that and you play card destruction. Well, they probably just went +6 from you using card destruction because you're going to hit like the brows, which are going to draw them 2 cards because they got discarded from an opponent's card effect. It's just not going to be a good time, and you're going to just hate yourself for doing that. Now, I know those instances are few and far between, but what concerns me is the fact that they brought this card back alongside Morphing Jar in a time where Danger is a brand new TCG exclusive archetype, so they kind of have the control over how good of an archetype they want to make Danger, and I kind of want to believe that card destruction was released from the ban list to kind of promote Danger and what the deck might potentially be later on. Soul Fusion is not that far away, and depending on the TCG exclusives in that set, it could honestly make Danger a tier 1 deck, and card destruction, while on its own isn't going to help facilitate that, it's just going to become one of those cards like Soul Charge that's basically going to auto win the game if it does resolve. You can stop it with stuff like Ash Blossom, but it's going to just become one of those sacky cards that people get really frustrated with, because if you just have no way to counter the card, then it's not really going to be a good time for you. So that's my biggest fear, but I'm really curious to see what people are going to do with card destruction and if it's going to become one of those staple one-ofs. I think in Trickstar it probably has the most viability. Other decks, it's probably not going to make the cut, but I might be surprised, and if you guys have any other cool applications for the card, be sure to let me know down in the comments below. So guys, thank you so much for watching the video. Be sure to like the video as always, subscribe to the channel for more amazing Yu-Gi-Oh content, and if you found this video helpful, consider becoming a YouTube channel member, because just by showing your support in any way that you can, you're investing in my ability to continue bringing you amazing Yu-Gi-Oh content. So thanks so much again, and we'll see you next time.